There's several reasons to have access to some form of lab for networking needs. The most common reason is in order to prepare for certification tests. However, if you're working in the network engineering profession, there's also ways of doing proof of concepts, um, traffic load simulations. You can vet out configs. You can try new command line features, become familiar with a new vendor's interface. Multiple reasons for having access to lab software. Anyway, I thought I'd briefly go over the different options for network lab um, access. So, I don't want to call it software because some of it is actually hardware, as it says here is hardware. Okay, first one, GNS3 is a way of running a lab simulating environment on a virtual machine or on bare metal in order to create software versions of networking hardware. Nice thing about it is free, and most vendors give you the ability to run their equipment within GNS3, and you don't have to pay for it. It can be a little bit clunky. Some people complain that the behavior within GNS3 is a little bit difficult to understand, and also the actual environment loses some authenticity. It becomes sluggish as a result of the underlying hardware that's being used to simulate the network equipment, having a strong effect on the behavior. Juniper Networks has a whole platform dedicated to certification prep called Juniper Open Learning. There's something called an all access pass to the Juniper Open Learning, which gives you access to all the courses in their library. It's something like $4,000 a year, something like that, which sounds like a lot of money. But you have to remember that Juniper networking equipment tends to be the Lamborghinis of the internet. Super expensive high-end routers. Is estimated somewhere between 65 and 75% of the packets on the internet are crossing Juniper routers. Typically, the MX series has been the backbone of the internet for almost a decade now, and their market share in the data networking carrier environment is still unrivaled. The second place is a long way back. So, because their equipment typically, and actually, when I say super expensive Lamborghini, that's true. It's high performance networking equipment. But if you cost out how much it takes to move a single packet from one interface to another interface, to just kind of boil it down, Juniper Networks actually ends up costing less than competitors like Cisco and other companies. There's not others out there, but anyway, Cisco and other companies, because their operating system and hardware, they do their own silicon, so they have that going for them, and their architecture has been built on going on 2 decades worth of experience. And they do source their own chip design. There's something called a Trio chipset that is at the heart of Juniper routers, and they're able to manufacture these at low cost. Their operating system runs on FreeBSD. It's in the process of forking over to different Linux, but traditionally FreeBSD, and all programmed in-house in Santa Clara, California, I think is where their headquarters is. Regardless, super expensive. So going out and buying a Juniper MX router in order to test on is really just not an option. So $4,000, $5,000 for a year's worth of access is, believe it or not, not that expensive, because you get certified in JNCIE on their service provider track, and you have a very high paying job for the rest of your life, basically. Cisco Viral is a new version of the CML Cisco lab environment. It's kind of like Juniper Open Learning. The difference being is that Juniper Open Learning is HTML5 driven, and Cisco Viral, you do have to actually spin up a virtual machine. So you lose the freedom from having resource constraints on your underlying virtual machine, and the performance and the behavior of the equipment that you're running on. For instance, if you're running a lot of IPsec inside Cisco Viral, it becomes really sluggish unless you throw a ton of CPU at it. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. You can purchase hardware. This is the most expensive solution that's out there. If you actually go out, buy used hardware and put it in your home office somewhere. It also generates a lot of heat and draws a lot of power. But there are people who are very dedicated to their certification pursuits that they do actually go out and purchase hardware. It also makes sense if you're a large enterprise to have a section of your network for lab equipment. So you have your production network, and then you also have a lab network that your engineers can work on and perform these testing of new features, new configuration changes in an environment that won't break anything. That's probably the best option. Obviously, you need a king's ransom in order to put a bunch of Juniper MX routers and a bunch of Cisco firewalls and other high-end switches in your house. You also are going to be dimming the lights in the neighborhood. What I choose is this last option here, eLabs. I do a lot of watching of webinars and a lot of watching of technical training videos as I could find. And one of the primary ones that I use has a part of their subscription access to eLabs, where you log on via HTML5 and are actually interacting with real hardware in a data center somewhere. So it feels just like real hardware without all the electrical situations and having to purchase to use equipment. It's actual real hardware that you're interacting on. In my personal opinion, that's the best, but lots of people are fans of GNS3. I see a lot of people out there building their own rigs with their own hardware. So really, I guess it's a personal choice.